All right, we'll go ahead. About time to get started, so we'll get started. Got a few new faces. We actually got a few new faces in the crowd tonight, man. I appreciate you joining us. We're kind of getting to that time of year where there's less and less people on lake. Not a bad thing. And all offshore structure fishing here lately. So we're going to go into two different topics tonight. I got my buddy Cord Hudkins, a new guy on Lake Fork, good buddy of mine, great fisherman, great guy. He's going to talk to you guys. I thought it'd be a good idea. I suggested this to him, how to break down a new lake. When you go to a new body of water, what do you look for? Where do you start? Because Cord being kind of new, I mean, he's been to Lake Fork before, but he just moved here full time a couple months ago. So he's been kind of going through that process of really getting a more in-depth understanding of Lake Fork as he starts to ease into guiding here over the summer. And I thought that'd be a good topic. And then when he's done with that, I'm going to go into detail with you guys about waypoint management on schools of fish and boat positioning on offshore structure. So graphing fish, how to find them, how to mark them on your map correctly, and then how to set your boat up where you can fish those offshore fish as efficiently as possible. So without dragging anything out, we'll just rock and roll it tonight. Cord, talk to us about fishing a new body of water, man. What do you look for? How do you get started?
Man, I do a lot of it. I do a lot of tournament fishing. I fish like the BFLs and some other tournament trails, so I got to go do a lot of it. Like roll up.
It's part of your normal routine.
Yeah, like roll up in a crappy time of year, and it usually never fails. There's a cold front or the water's dropped 3 foot.
Sure, so, that's tournament fishing.
I mean, but most of the time, obviously, kind of general is time of year, watercolor, water temp. It's usually kind of the first thing I look at. You know, summertime, East Texas, you kind of already know offshore, but I also like to keep them honest.
Well, you're a little bit like me. You're from Oklahoma. I'm from Southeast Texas. Both of us, we've always got in this region that shallow water card in our back pocket, right? So these fisheries around here, you can say we're keeping them honest, but honestly, these fisheries keep us honest. Yeah. Because there is a population of shallow fish that lives year round on these lakes out here.
Yeah, there is. I mean,
what's one of the first things? So, I mean, you're looking for seasonal patterns for the time of year and just general seasonal patterns. Now, how do you figure those out? I mean, is it just years of knowledge from fishing, or what is it? Is there research that goes into it?
I do a lot of homework. I mean, like some of you guys may see like the pros talk about it, and I do, like, before I go anywhere, whether it be a tournament, fun fishing trip, whatever. I do my research, whether it be YouTube videos, articles. I sit there on my phone. I might be drinking beer, just like looking at Navionics, or my Lake Master on my phone, just researching and kind of getting a game plan of, like, you know, popular areas, like high interest areas. And then when I hit the water, you know, I look at the watercolor, water temp and all that. But I just put like the confidence back in my hand and go to work.
Tournament results too, right? Like knowing when you get into a new fishery, kind of knowing the type of fish you can expect to catch, or the type of fish you can expect to catch if you're doing good is an important thing. So I used to always, when I was going to, I like to look up tournament results. I talked about this earlier in the year when I was going to Rayburn, is I looked up last year's January tournament results on Rayburn to see, okay, what's it going to take for me to win? And what I found out, you get about 25 pounds, you got a chance. Yeah. Unless Monday rolls up on the right brush pile and catches 38, which happened to you in the VFL, I know. Oh, yeah. But yeah, if that happens, that's an outlier. But the majority of the tournaments on Sam Rayburn in January, about 25 pounds to win it. So I knew if I caught 20, I was going to make some money. If I get 25, I got a chance to win. And so that helps me when I'm going to a new lake, trying to learn it, trying to practice on it for a tournament. Yeah. Once I start finding some fish, if I'm finding nothing but 1 to 3 pound fish, I know I gotta do something different. Yeah. If I want a chance at this deal, or if I know that fishery has more to offer than what I'm getting out of it, so I may change complete areas of the lake, whatever have you. But tournament results, I mean, to me the first thing, and you can kick in where you want to, figuring out whether or not the lake has healthy underwater vegetation, not just shoreline grass. But because in the springtime, shoreline grass is great, and Google Earth is a great way to look for shoreline grass in the springtime. But outside of that, you want to know if that lake has hydrilla, coontail, milfoil. Yep. Essentially, those 3 things are the big things you want to learn. So finding out if a lake has that is super important. So you want to look for any reports of people catching fish out of submergent vegetation. You want to look at Google Earth and see if you can see mats in the summertime months, stuff like that. And if it does have grass, okay, now that's a whole different factor.
And then, you know, like one thing I've ran into and continually do is everyone likes to go fish history. Everyone says not to, but history's not always bad. You know, I've done it on Rayburn and here, you know, which, you know, prior to me moving here, it's been years since I was here, but certain areas, I know there used to be some grass here. I'm going to go check this out. And you pull up and you're like, there ain't no grass.
There's a lot of that on this lake. There's a lot of areas on this lake that used to have grass.
But I mean, like Rayburn's the same way, just because they've been spraying a bunch, and they're killing a lot of the grass out because for whatever reason it's getting choked out, or people are complaining.
Invasive
species mixed in with the good hydrilla, they have no option but to kill it all. So I go roll up in a spot where I'm like, oh, 2 years ago I killed him right here. I'm gonna go check it out, and then you're like, it's like mud and dirt, and there's nothing else. So you got to completely scrap it, and then you just got to go run and look. I mean, it's crazy how much time you would spend just looking, just put the boat in the water and just go and just cover water and just look. And then whenever you find an area where you think it's going to be productive or it looks good or you kind of get that feel, like I said, I put a confidence bait in my hand and just cover a lot of water until you get a bite or two in a certain area. Then it's like, all right, well, I got a bite here and here in the last like 150, 200 yards. Let's slow down a little bit and start picking things apart.
So that's something I wanted to ask you about, because from what I see, the guys that are the top level tour guys, they fish really fast most of the time. They fish so fast, especially in practice. They fish super fast, super efficient. But one thing about going to a new lake and trying to find fish is go through areas really fast and aggressive. Like fish do something you have confidence in, but fish really fast when you first start. Because if there is an abundance of, like, if there's a big population of fish in an area, you'll catch something fishing fast. Yeah, maybe you need to slow down to win the tournament. Yeah. Maybe you need to slow down to have the best day you can on a fun trip on the weekend. But you can fish fast through those areas, and if you get a bite or two fishing fast, now let's slow down and see what that area has to offer. That's something you kind of alluded to right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just pick an area and like you said, like go to work.
Because if you go through it super fast and get nothing, the odds are, no matter what you do in that area, it's not going to be just the most productive area on the lake.
No, and it may not be, but a lot of times timing is a big deal. A lot of people,
especially this time of year,
or I would say almost any time of year. Now you got periods in the fall when things line up right to where you could be just about anywhere at any time throwing anything and catch them. Same way sometimes in the spring, but yeah, like timing is a big deal, and it's happened to me a bunch to where I may go through, like, mark a bunch of fish, may get 1 or 2 bites, they're just not committing, and be like, oh, this ain't no good, and come back to it 2 or 3 days later when it's like the day before tournament, and be at a different time of the day, and within 50 yards catch like 15 pounds, and you're like, this is where I'm going to spend my tournament. And I literally did that on Grand this year. I 5th placed, and I worked a spot about 300 yards for like 8 hours, just did down and backs all day, and 5th place. But I went there twice in practice and never got a bite. And
so what was it? So you go there twice in practice, you don't get a bite. What was it that made you commit to that area in the tournament?
This particular one was pre-spawn. Water got real high, and it was muddy. Grand Lake's usually pretty clean, a little bit cleaner than this lake. And it looked like chocolate milk, except for there was like 2 small areas in the lake, one where I did really good at, and one where I caught a giant about 10 inches long in practice.
About 10 inches long, folks. Here we go.
But I mean, it was like the only clean water in the lake, and I pretty much ran history, and I ran a whole bunch of new water that looked good, and they just wouldn't bite anything. I fished fast, fished slow, and I was like, high probability chance that cleanest water, whenever that's what they're used to. You take a clean water fish and put chocolate milk around him, he doesn't know how to feed.
So you went to Grand Lake under conditions where your practice just stunk. You didn't catch anything.
I caught 1 fish in 3 days.
Caught 1 fish in 3 days. Folks, that's a grind there now. That's a grind when you go to a new lake and catch 1 in 3 days. But what you did was you covered a bunch of water and you said, well, this is the best I got. This is clean water. Odds are, if I'm going to catch them, I'm going to catch them here, and then slow down from there.
Yeah, and I've done the same thing on Rayburn. That's where, like, timing and keeping them honest as far as, to round back to the shallow. I had a pretty decent finish in January, and I caught all my fish in 3 foot or less of water in January on Rayburn in 54-degree water temps. And then we had that crazy, wonderful cold spell, and we went back in March. I went back-to-back days, and I caught everything 6 to 7 foot and suspended. They were suspended over grass.
Jerk bait,
jerk bass over grass. They had pulled back off. They had fish pulling up on beds late in the day when the water temps were warming up in January. Then they all abandoned.
Yeah, it was a weird year this year the way that worked out. It was weird.
The water temps were colder in March than they were when I was there in January.
So we go to a new lake, we do research, we try to dissect what the seasonal patterns are going to be, which there's tons of information out there now for seasonal patterns and stuff like that you can do through YouTube research or whatever you want to do. We want to find out that. We want to find out what kind of fish the lake has to offer. Tournament results are a really good measure of that. And then Google Earth is a huge tool to tell you if it has grass or not, especially.
Yes.
That's a huge tool. Now, if a lake has grass versus a lake that doesn't have grass, how are we doing it differently? Let's say for summertime, if you see a lake that has grass or a lake that doesn't have grass, what's your starting point on either one of those?
Summertime, if you're going to like a non-grass lake, like you're going to go to Oklahoma with me, and there's not very much grass in Oklahoma in them lakes, So a lot of those fish relate.
We're going to go to 10 Killer and there's no grass. What are we doing?
Zero grass. It's rock piles and isolated brush piles and stuff like that. And I found a bunch of them throughout the past couple of years using that Google Earth. You find a year when the water's way down, or when they pull it down. You go through those years and you find it when it's way down, and you might see where you'd have never looked for a brush pile, and somebody's got a giant crappie brush pile parked out there. So you just screenshot it, mark it on your maps, and then you go graph it, see if they're there or they're not. I do that a lot, especially for tournaments too, like especially in Oklahoma because there's not a lot of grass. So they're either wood related, a lot of dock related fish, and that's a lot of trial and error, and just covering water is the
So is that the most important thing to you, even over all the research and everything else, is when you first get there to fish fast and efficiently and cover as much water as you can?
9 times out of 10, unless I've got some kind of tip, or if I've been fishing that lake somewhat frequently, we don't have near the restrictions, obviously, as like no off limits or whatever. So I've been fishing a place somewhat, frequently, and I kind of got a pretty good idea of what's going on. I may go to that, certain section of the lake. I may, like if I'm coming to Fork, I may just stay on the east or the west arm, depending on which one's fishing better, and just expand on what I already know and try to find something sneakier or off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Then also always I like to keep an open mind. Like, don't be afraid to do something that you don't normally do. For you, instance, you probably don't own anything to throw a drop shot in your boat.
Oh, he throws.
I do.
You don't either. You told me the other day you didn't have to spin it around the boat.
I know. I just throw it on a medium action bait caster.
But still, I
don't have the super finesse version of a drop shot, but I don't ever fish water that requires that.
Yeah.
So, I can't throw we're going to, like the smallmouth guys on Elite Series right now, I can't do that drop shot.
Yeah.
But I can do the drop shot you need to out here with 12-pound line.
Yeah.
But I do have drop shot stuff, and I have thrown it, and I will at times do it. I just hate it. I hate it because everybody say with me, you can win a tournament throwing a drop shot. You can.
You can.
But you're still going to look gay doing it.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? The W is a W, huh?
Just won a tournament doing it.
Yeah. Well, what's ironic is back when I tournament fished more, I actually have too. I've won a tournament throwing a drop shot, believe it or not. I hated every second of it, but I did.
I had a co-angler this year on Rayburn. He's an older gentleman. He said he'd been co-angling on the FLW MLF stuff since like '94. Got his own boat, but just never cared to get in the front of a boat during a tournament. He literally all day, I'm working a jerkbait. He just chunks his drop shot behind the boat, clicks it in, and sticks it under his arm, and just eats snacks. That's all he did all day.
That's my kind of fish.
Literally just drugged this, never worked it. He just held the rod there, and all of a sudden I'd hear him grunt, and he'd be back there, and he's like cranking in like a 5-pounder, and I'm like, this old man's whooping me, just dragging a Cinco around behind my boat. And then finally I started catching him, but he filled the limit in like 2 hours, just sitting back there eating Oreos and just looking at the eagles fly around, and
I can get down with that.
Yeah, that's pretty much what he did.
It's like live baiting. It's like live baiting, but you're not cheating though.
No, just a little green pump around. No, that I can't do. I'm fishing.
I know. I'm with you there. Most bass fish. It's funny because fishermen are like, I think people that don't fish a lot think that like fishing requires patience. No, catfishing requires patience.
Yeah.
Not what we do.
And a 30-pack.
There ain't a whole lot of patience going on in a bass fisherman's mind because we're wanting to chunk and wind and twitch and jerk and hop and skip and jump and run from one spot to the next. No, there ain't no patience happening there. But well, what else about going to a new lake? That's pretty much it. Just do your online research, answer the grass question. What if a lake does have grass and you're going to a brand new, never been there? So let's say, you ever been to Gunnersville?
I have not actually.
Okay, so let's say we're going to Gunnersville next week. It's July. We're going to Gunnersville. Know it's got grass. What are we doing?
I'm probably going to keep a trap, a big plug, and probably a spoon, just because doing research, you see the guys do it. That's
offshore, yeah.
That's a big deal. Finding that deeper grass.
Punching rig though for summertime.
And a punching rig. Bouncing back and forth. But obviously, I'd probably go home right now and just research and research and research. You know, like
so when you go to look at that grass on a grass lake, what is it that so you know a lake has grass? We're going to Guntersville next week. What are you going to look for on Google Earth or whatever you're going to do to prepare? Okay, what areas of grass do I need to check? What structure areas?
I'm looking like closer to deep water channel swings.
Try to find the grass mats that are closer to deeper water.
You know, like the shallower pockets off the main lake, the ones that and especially if you can find like on that Google Maps or getting out on the water and practicing or running the lake, the stuff that's got holes or like a drain through the middle of it, some kind of funneling point or someplace to where, you know, if you get like a big cove and it's just choked out, one, you ain't going to hardly be able to get around in there. You ain't going to be able to hardly fish it. So, I mean, if it's choked out, I'm just going to, I mean, yeah, there might be a couple 10-pounders in there, but, I mean, I wouldn't know how to catch them. So, I mean, I'd leave the choked out stuff alone, but, you know, maybe fish the edges.
Fish the edges.
You know, but, yeah, I mean.
Finding those drains and grass. That's one thing about it. If a lake has grass and you go in a new lake that has grass, finding the structure within that is so important. You know, Lake Fork has an overwhelming amount of timber in it, even though nowadays you can't really see it all, but there's an overwhelming amount of timber to fish out there. And a lot of good grass lakes like Guntersville at times and how this lake used to be and how Rayburn used to be, there's an overwhelming amount of grass. You'll get into a creek arm of the lake and the whole thing is lined with grass, or like Lake Welsh is an overwhelming amount of grass. And the biggest thing that I can tell you guys when you're going to a new lake that has an abundance of grass is you have to find the bottom contour changes within that grass area. So what you do is you take that area that has grass and you just block out the rest. Like, don't think about that. Look at that, just the area that has the grass. And then you look at your Navionics map and you look at everything you can find to find creek channel swings and points and humps and different contour changes within that grass. Because a lot of times you'll pull up on a grass mat and you'll be like, dang, that is a mile of straight matted hydrilla. Where do I even start? Well, like first thing Court says is a really good idea. Find where the creek channel swings up next to it. Find where the deep water comes up next to it. That's a bottom contour change. If you can find a hump inside the grass mat or something like that, you can have this whole mile-long stretch of grass, and there will be an area as big as this room that will hold the majority of the fish. You'll catch the majority of your fish out of a small little area.
Composition's a big deal too.
Yes, hardness of bottom.
Find the one hard spot within it. You know, just I'm sure you've done it. I've done it too. Like you said, just get overwhelmed. Like pads are like the same way. You fish and fish and fish, and you're punching, flipping, or frogging or whatever. And like you said, you'll come across one spot that's half the size of this room, and you just catch one right after another, and usually it's because there's a hard spot or there's like a little gravel bed or shell bed mixed into it, something different, you know, because that or even points on the grass. You know, if you get a spot that just a point runs out on a little bit, that's
another thing.
The long straight dead banks, I mean, it may look good, but if it's just a straight arrow bank, you know, to me I feel like you're just beating a dead horse at that point, just because it's like that. And to me, when you do something like that, you lose focus because you're just making the same cast, 45 degree, parallel on the bank. And after about 150 of those, you're just like, look at them girls in that boat over there. You know, like you ain't even paying attention.
Wait a minute, there's girls in the boat over there.
But, you know, I mean, like if you focus on the areas where the points draw out, or if there's a couple, you know, laydowns in the grass of the pads, or stands of timber or whatever, you know, I mean, Fork's got some of that, you know, like where you got good grass or whatever, but you got some stick-ups in the middle of it or whatever.
Yes.
And that's,
yeah, I always like to focus on those contour changes. And as far as doing research for a new lake, like the way to find that with grass is to try and find the images on Google Earth where the grass is matted, okay? And if you'll look at areas where in that grass mat, all of a sudden that mat breaks up, that's one of two things. That's an elevation change or a bottom content change. Either the bottom got so hard the grass couldn't grow on it as good, or the bottom level came up or down and it changed the ability of the grass to grow on it. So if you find a mat and you find like an area that's like thinned out in that mat on Google Earth, you're going to want to maybe check Navionics, but also go check that in person, because anytime that mat breaks up, when you've got a big solid mat, when that mat breaks up, something's happening there that's different, and that's the big deal. When you're overwhelmed with cover, you got to find something different in the structure. Everybody know the difference between cover and structure? Cover is timber, docks, grass, lily pads, any type of vegetation. That's cover. Structure is the bottom contours, right? So you got to find the difference in the structure on grass lakes. That's really important.
Yeah.
Really important. It's a lot like when you're trying to figure out offshore structure out in deep water where it's just a vast ocean of open water. Well, what do we look for? We look for the biggest obvious contour changes, the big points, the humps, anything that's a contour change is what we look for. So, any questions on new lake research or anything like that going to a new pond? All right, well, let's get into, I want to talk to you guys about how to map out your way, how to manage your waypoints for marking schools of fish and how to set up your boat. Because I've been getting asked the question quite a bit online lately on live streams. How do you position your boat on a point? How do you position your boat on an offshore school of fish to catch them? And that is about as complicated of a question as you could ask me. There's so many aspects to that, from the shape of the structure, the shape of the school, the wind direction, the bait I'm gonna throw. Like, there's so many aspects to how I'm gonna set my boat up. So this can be a hump, this can be a row bed. I just drew a really simple point, and I drew 2 lines here. So typically when you fish a piece of offshore structure, you're gonna have a bottom depth and a top depth. For me, I wanna have a bottom depth and a top depth. So like out here lately, kind of my top depth here lately, most of the time has been about 15, no more than 12 foot on the shallow side, and about 20 is where I've been on the deep side out here. Now, if I start marking fish out deeper off the structure, then I'll look deeper. But we'll just call this 15 to 20 just to keep things really simple for this purpose, okay? So this inside line is gonna be 15 foot. And the outside line is gonna be 20 foot. So that means the area of this point that I need to graph is all in this lane right here, okay? That's where I need to graph. Now, my highest percentage area and where I really want to see the fish set up is somewhere out here on the end. It doesn't mean they can't set up over here. And if I'm having a day where I've ran 5 or 6 or 8 or 10